Each state and local association is responsible for enforcing the Code of Ethics, which includes providing mediation and conducting arbitration hearings. However, only realtors and realtor associates are obligated to abide by the code. Let me be clear. An affiliate member of the association cannot be found in violation of the code because affiliates are not realtors and are therefore not bound by the Code of Ethics. So, who has jurisdiction to enforce the Code of Ethics? Your local association or the association where you hold primary or secondary membership, or the association where you participate in the MLS but do not hold realtor membership. The local association is not a regulatory body and cannot determine if a law has been violated. Only the courts and the state regulatory agencies can enforce the law. One of the most frequently asked questions by members is,
will the board take my license away? Or if I'm found in violation, will the association report me to the state regulatory agency?
Again, the Association of Realtors does not have the authority to revoke your license. However, the association can refer a matter to the regulatory body if a member is found in violation of a public trust. In the NAR Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual, public trust is the misappropriation of client or customer funds or property, willful discrimination, or fraud resulting in substantial economic harm.
The following is an example of how the association handles a violation of public trust. Realtor Robert loved selling real estate, but when the market took a downturn, so did his bank account. If he could sell 2 of his listings by the end of the month, he would be home free. Well, the end of the month came and went, and he was beginning to feel the pinch. He realized he could not make his car payment. Fortunately, an offer came in on 16 Maple Avenue, and he promptly put the deposit into a separate escrow account. The bank was dawdling on the buyer's financing. It seemed like an eternity, and another car payment due date was looming. The buyer's agent assured Robert that he could get financing, it was just taking longer than expected, and asked that the seller and Robert hang in there.
After Robert was reassured the deal would go through, a second offer with a deposit came in on another listing. Desperate, he saw no harm in borrowing funds from his escrow account and putting it into his personal account to make the double payment on his car. After all, he needed his car to earn a living. Since the second transaction wasn't scheduled to go through until next month, he could close on the first property and replace the money in his escrow before the second property closed. Much to Robert's chagrin, both deals fell through and both buyers wanted their money back. As you might have guessed, Robert didn't have it. Both buyers filed ethics complaints naming Article 8, which states, realtors shall keep in a special account in an appropriate financial institution separated from their own funds, monies coming into their possession in a trust for other persons, such as escrows, trust funds, clients' monies, and other like items. Robert admitted to the hearing panel what he had done and was found in violation of Article 8. While members of the hearing panel could empathize with Robert's situation, it was no excuse for taking money that was not his. Due to the seriousness of the violation, the hearing panel recommended to the board of directors to suspend Robert's membership in the association for a period of 8 months. The board of directors concurred with the panel's findings and felt the recommendation for disciplinary action was appropriate. Since Robert's actions violated the public trust, the association forwarded the final ethics decision to the State Real Estate Licensing Authority.
Often, difficulties between real estate professionals arise out of misunderstandings, miscommunications, or lack of ongoing communication. When communication fails, it creates all kinds of problems. Here is an example where the ongoing communication between 2 sales associates takes a nosedive. Has this ever happened to you?
I put an offer on a property 2 weeks ago and I haven't heard a word from the listing office. At first, the listing broker Joe was bending over backwards to work with us. He was going above and beyond. His listing had been on the market for some time and he needed to get it sold. My buyer decided to buy the property as an investment, renovate it, and put it back on the market. We submitted our offer to Joe, who said he would be in touch with us as soon as he had a chance to present the offer to the seller. And then there was no Joe. I left one message after another and nothing happened. It was as if he had just disappeared off the face of the earth. Now my buyer thinks I'm inept, and it's my fault that I can't get an answer out of this guy. Since he is the broker, I can't go to his broker and get results. After waiting 3 weeks, my buyer walked out, and now he refuses to work with me.
If the listing office had communicated with the cooperating office, all of this could have been avoided. A simple telephone call or email is all that was needed, and it would have been greatly appreciated. You are a profession of competitors who work together to buy and sell real estate in your communities, and it is essential to keep the lines of communications open at all times. Even if your seller chooses one offer over another, the buyer deserves to know the status of his offer as soon as possible. We saw what happened between Steve and his buyer. He lost the sale and the buyer. If conflict should ever raise its ugly head between sales associates, firms, or brokers, open, constructive discussion often resolves questions or differences and may possibly diminish the likelihood of pursuing further action. When realtors are unable to settle disagreements between themselves, the local association can help. There are 2 options available: informal dispute resolution through mediation or an ombudsman program, and formal dispute resolution by filing an ethics complaint or arbitration request. Let's take a moment to talk about informal dispute resolution, starting with mediation. Mediation is a voluntary process through which the parties meet with a mediator who facilitates a mutually acceptable resolution in a monetary dispute. The ombudsman program is also a voluntary ethics process where the parties communicate with an ombudsman whose primary role is communication and conciliation, not adjudication. The ombudsman does not determine whether ethics violations have occurred. Rather, they anticipate, identify, and help resolve misunderstandings and disagreements before they ripen into disputes and possible charges of unethical conduct. Not all associations offer the ombudsman program as a service, but if yours does, you may want to consider it as an option. Did you notice the word voluntary was used in both methods of informal dispute resolution? This means you do not have to participate in these proceedings. Mediation is NAR's preferred method of dispute resolution. Mediation is an informal means of resolving contractual disputes without the formality that comes with an arbitration hearing. The beauty of the process is in its informality. There are no lawyers, no witnesses, and no evidence to present. Each side still has an opportunity to explain their case and positions on the situation, and each has the opportunity to ask questions of each other. The trained mediator may use a variety of techniques to move both sides to a mutually acceptable resolution. And if an agreement is reached, the parties put the agreement in writing, stating the mutually agreed terms and conditions, and it becomes legally binding. In essence, there are no losers in mediation, only winners. With arbitration, however, there is a winner and a loser. If you were to compare the 2 processes side by side, it's easy to understand why NAR says mediation is the preferred dispute resolution tool of the Realtor organization. This comparison chart says it all. The cost of mediation is far less than arbitration. Arbitration fees can go as high as $500, and both sides are assessed an arbitration fee.
Some members assume that if they win, the other party will be required to pay the winner's fee and attorney's fees. It depends on local association policy. Some associations may return all, a portion, or none of the arbitration fee. As for the attorney's fees, the loser is not bound to pay the winner's attorney's fees unless both parties agree to this in advance. Setting up mediation takes less time than arbitration. Planning arbitration involves dealing with lawyers, witnesses, panelists, the association attorney, and finding a date that suits everyone's schedule. And what if someone gets sick, shows up with an unplanned witness, or requests a postponement? With mediation, all it usually takes is a simple telephone call to a mediation officer to schedule a date, time, and location. and all you have to do is bring yourself. A very appealing aspect of mediation is that both sides can reach their own conclusion. In arbitration, you turn the fate of your commission over to a panel of 3 to 5 people. A common question is, does the panel ever split the award? The answer is yes, but only in rare circumstances. In fact, NAR does not recommend it. If you think splitting the commission is a fair approach, then mediation is really the option for you. The advantage to arbitration over mediation is there is definite closure. When the award panel makes a decision, it's over. In mediation, if the discussion reaches an impasse, the process continues and the next step is arbitration. Perhaps the best thing about the mediation process is the fact that in most instances, everyone leaves the table with their relationships intact.
The entire concept of mediation is to bring the parties together to work out a solution in an informal setting, which fosters willingness on both sides to work out their differences. Arbitration for some can be the last resort to settle the matter once and for all. While meant to be a professional, formal approach to dispute resolution between colleagues, some parties have a tendency to take the draw a line in the sand approach. They come prepared to do battle with a bevy of lawyers, witnesses, stacks of affidavits, and more. This causes irreparable damage to relationships, especially when it turns into a round of he said, she said. Mediation or arbitration? Which would you choose to resolve your dispute issues?
I want to thank you both for coming today. I will be your mediation officer for this session. It has been explained to you that mediation is a voluntary informal dispute resolution process offered by the association. At the outset, I would like to encourage both of you to appreciate each other's position in the matter and to participate in good faith. Doing so will enable you to work out a solution that may be agreeable to both sides. You are more than welcome to resolve the matter at any time. Any recommendation for resolution can be oral or in writing and will be provided to both parties at the conclusion of this mediation proceeding. You will have the opportunity to consider any recommended proposed resolution to the matter at the time the proposal is made, or within a specified period of time not to exceed 48 hours. During this time, you will have the option to accept or reject and advise me of your decision. If either of the parties rejects the proposed resolution, these mediation proceedings will be deemed concluded, and the matter will proceed to arbitration. Any party who does not respond to me within 72 hours will be deemed to have rejected the suggested solution. Any offers of settlement that are not accepted or any suggested resolution proposed by me that was not accepted cannot be introduced as evidence in a subsequent arbitration hearing.
I'm entitled to 4% of the sales price of 123 Marine Drive, which is $12,000. As a listing broker, Steve offered 4% cooperative compensation to all participants in the Rosewood MLS for 123 Marine Drive. I found a buyer for that property. Steve's the broker for Luke Realty, and I'm the broker for Bonnie Realty. My customer, Brian, was looking for a home on Marine Drive, and when I saw 123 Marine listed in the MLS, I quickly made an appointment with Steve to show the property to Brian. I knew that the $300,000 asking price was well within my customer's price range, and the property, at least on paper, met all of Brian's and his wife's needs. It seemed like a perfect fit. So Brian and I looked at the property on Monday. We went back to see it again on Wednesday with Brian's wife, Rosa, and Steve. After walking the property lines, looking at the house, and spending approximately an hour there, Brian explained that he and Rosa needed some time to talk about submitting an offer. He said they needed to take the weekend because Rosa didn't want to pay more than $250,000 for a new home, and they had some decisions to make. Although they qualified for a $300,000 home, Brian went on to say that he and his wife wanted to buy a new car and keep their children in private school. They would have to weigh what was best for their family and what would best fit for their budget. I called to check in with Brian on Monday at 10 a.m. and asked if he and his wife wanted to write an offer on 123 Marine Drive, but was surprised to learn that he and his wife actually had written an offer the day before with Steve. I could not believe my ears. Brian apologized and explained that Rosa had taken a liking to Steve when he showed the property to them the week before. Brian said he really wanted the property regardless of price, but Rosa was adamant that she would only agree to offer the full $300,000 if they wrote the offer through Steve. So Brian said he compromised with Rosa, contacted the listing broker on Sunday, and had him write the offer. The property sold for $300,000 and the closing took place last week. So now I'm entitled, as the procuring cause of sale, to the 4%, $12,000 commission that Steve, the listing broker here, offered in the MLS.
Thank you, Lauren. Now that we have heard from you, it's Steve's turn.
Okay. This was a short sale. Only got 4% of the gross sales price. 4. And I think it's ridiculous for Lauren to think that she's entitled to anything. After all, I did all of the real work on this deal, all of the heavy lifting. When I entered the listing for that property in the MLS, I clearly indicated that this property was subject to a short sale. Lauren has no idea how much work goes into a short sale. First, I had to help the seller determine her liability, then discuss her options, whether to keep the property, work with the lender to reset her payments and forgive arrears, sell the property and bring cash to close escrow, offer the lender a short sale or deed in lieu of foreclosure, or allow the property to go into a foreclosure. We determined that her property could not be sold for an amount to satisfy all liens, encumbrances, and costs of sale, and that the seller's health and recent divorce made it impossible for her to keep the property. The seller was very cooperative and wanted to do whatever was necessary to minimize the damage done to her credit. In fact, she had just finished off paying $80,000 of debt her husband had incurred behind her back. Now, I worked with the lender's loss mitigation department to confirm that the lender would consider a short sale. I also presented the lender with an acceptable market price offer, along with the completed short sale package and narrative explaining why the short sale was necessary and desirable. Brian and his wife Rosa called me Sunday morning and asked that I write the offer for the Marine Drive property. So I did, based on my seller's best interests. I know the buyers would have never submitted an offer through Lauren on that property because Rosa says she doesn't even trust Lauren. She told me in confidence that she thought Lauren was flirting with her husband behind her back.
Oh, please.
Hey, I'm just telling you what she said. And I don't get why you feel you're entitled to the entire amount of compensation I received for this transaction after I did everything. I mean, even if this goes to an arbitration hearing, the panel finds that this is a procuring cause of sale, which I think is highly unlikely, the most she would be awarded is 2% or $6,000, half of what I received.
Steve, did you disclose in the MLS how much you compensated a cooperating broker if the lender reduces the commission?
I sure did. It's 2%.
Since Steve informed all participants the offer of compensation would be 2% if the lender reduced the commission in the broker remarks, would you be willing to consider accepting 2% if Steve was agreeable?
It's better than nothing.
Would you both agree that we now have 2% on the table to discuss instead of 4%?
I agree.
You know what? That's fine. I guess so. I still don't think she's entitled to anything, but we can go with that.
Look, Steve, I went on 2 showings with this couple, and you have no idea what it was like. He was easygoing, and she acted like she was a diva or something.
True. Okay. Yeah.
I felt sorry for the man.
Sounds like you both agree you were dealing with a difficult situation. Lauren showed the property twice and was waiting to write the offer until she found out it had already been submitted to you, Steve. You stated there was an estrangement issue between Lauren and Rosen, and that's why the buyer wanted to write the offer through you. Do you feel Lauren's efforts in any way helped procure the buyers?
All right. I'll admit she did show the property. I'll give you that. And Rosa was a piece of work. But I do feel that I'm the one that put this deal together in the end to make it fly because that's what I do. But I'm willing to pay Lauren something for a time, but I still don't think 2% is fair.
What would you consider as fair?
Fair? 1.5%.
You're kidding, aren't you?
Nope.
Steve, most of your efforts were on behalf of the seller, and that was your job. All you did was write the offer for the buyer. That was it. I did all of the rest. I'll admit, you did a great job helping your seller, and for that you're to be commended. But I did a lot of work on this transaction from the buying side, and I deserve to be fairly compensated. Think about it. I remember this happened to you once. You put a lot of work into a deal, and the listing broker refused to pay you what you earned, so you know how it feels. We've always worked well together. Aren't you willing to meet me halfway? I came down to 2%. I simply cannot afford to take less.
Steve, are you willing to consider your offer? If not, we may have reached an impasse.
All right, well, you can't blame a guy for trying. So, Lauren, I will go with your 2%. If that makes you happy, 2%.
If Lauren and Steve had not reached an agreement in their mediation, the next step would have been arbitration. This is referred to as formal dispute resolution. Article 17 of the Code of Ethics states, in the event of contractual disputes or specific non-contractual disputes as defined in Standard of Practice 17-4 between brokers associated in different firms arising out of their relationship as realtors, the realtors shall submit the dispute to arbitration in accordance with the regulations of their board or boards rather than litigate the matter. Lauren's request for arbitration would go to the association's grievance committee. The grievance committee screens the request for arbitration to determine if the claim in the request, if taken as true at face value, is a matter related to a real estate transaction and is properly arbitrable. Properly arbitrable means, is there a basis on which this arbitration can be held? In other words, was there an offer of compensation in the MLS, or did a verbal or written agreement for compensation exist between the parties?
I worked with a buyer for 2 long years showing her countless properties. One property in particular stood out, 234 South Thomas Street. I presented 2 offers for her on that property, and the seller refused to budge on price, so we decided to move on. She told me she wanted to take a break and would give me a call in a couple of weeks. A week after my buyer decided to take a break, the listing broker called to let me know an offer had come in on 234 South Thomas Street and it was accepted. What threw me for a loop was, and you've probably guessed it, she said the offer was from my buyer. She knew I was keeping an eye on the listing to see if the seller would come down in price and wanted to let me know before I saw it pending in the MLS. After several futile attempts to reach the buyer to find out why she abandoned me, I asked the listing broker who submitted the offer. She said it was a relative of the buyer. The property closed 2 weeks ago, and I want to collect my commission. I'm entitled to it. The listing broker told me she didn't withhold the commission because she was afraid the transaction wouldn't go through if the buyer's relative wasn't paid. After all, she had her seller's best interest to consider. I decided to file for arbitration. I told the professional standards administrator at the board I didn't feel it was necessary to file against the listing broker, just the cooperating broker. I was told I could file against the cooperating broker and leave the listing broker out of it altogether because my circumstances qualify under Standard of Practice 17-4 as a non-contractual dispute that the association could hear.
Here's a tip. If you file an arbitration request, it's a good idea to name the firm as a complainant and as the respondent to avoid delays if one of the brokers in the dispute leaves the firm while the request for arbitration is going through the professional standards process. That way, if a broker leaves the firm, another broker can step in without having to start the process from the beginning. Remember, the clock is ticking. Complainants have 180 days from the time the transaction closes or from the time you could have known with reasonable diligence, whichever is later. The fact that you've already filed a previous request for arbitration has no bearing on the second filing.
The grievance committee has reviewed Lauren's request for arbitration and determined that a hearing is warranted. After proper notice has been given, Steve and Lauren will appear before an arbitration tribunal of the association. The tribunal consists of a panel of their peers who are selected from the association's Professional Standards Committee by the association's Professional Standards Chair. Steve and Lauren were both given the opportunity to challenge the panel members prior to the hearing, and they have the right to be represented by legal counsel, bring witnesses, and present evidence at the hearing. It is important to repeat that any offers of settlement that were not accepted or any suggested resolution proposed by the mediation offer that was not accepted will not be introduced as evidence at the arbitration hearing. The good news for Lauren and Steve is that they can settle at any time prior to when the hearing panel meets in executive session, which is where the panel determines who wins the award. Keep in mind, in arbitration, you either win or you lose. It is only in rare circumstances the award is split. Awards may be enforced by the courts when not paid by the non-prevailing party.
Here's a quick quiz to see what you learned in Chapter 6. Question 1. Who has jurisdiction to enforce the Code of Ethics? The answer? The local association where you hold primary or secondary membership, or where you participate in the MLS and do not hold Realtor membership. Question 2. Does the Realtor Association have the authority to take your real estate license away? The answer is no. The Realtor Association is a trade association, not a regulatory body. Question 3. What is a violation of public trust? Public trust is the misappropriation of client or customer funds or property, willful discrimination, or fraud resulting in a substantial economic harm. In cases where there is a violation of public trust, the matter of the hearing panel's findings of fact are forwarded to the state regulatory agency. Next question. What is the NAR preferred method of dispute resolution? The answer, mediation. And question 5, true or false? Arbitration is a form of formal dispute resolution. If you said true, you are correct.